Howard William Cosell was an American sports journalist, broadcaster, and author. Cosell became prominent and influential during his tenure with ABC Sports from 1953 until 1985. Cosell was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to Jewish parents, Isidore and Nellie Cohen, and was raised in Brooklyn, New York. The name of Cosell's grandfather was changed when he entered the United States. Howard Cosell said he changed his name from Cohen to Cosell while a law student as a way to honor his father and grandfather by reverting to a version of his family's original Polish name. Cosell was widely known for his boisterous and confident personality. Cosell said of himself, "I've been called arrogant, pompous, obnoxious, vain, cruel, verbose, a show-off. And of course I am." Cosell was sarcastically nicknamed Humble Howard by fans and media critics. In its obituary for Cosell, the New York Times described Cosell's effect on American sports coverage by saying, "He entered sports broadcasting in the mid-1950s when the predominant style was unabashed adulation, offered a brassy counterpoint that was first ridiculed, then copied until it became the dominant note of sports broadcasting. He also became an antagonistic, almost bad guy-esque commentary, notably giving his criticism of Terry Bradshaw while suggesting that he did not have the intelligence to win in the league. In 1993, TV Guide named Howard Cosell the all-time best sportscaster in its issue celebrating 40 years of television. Prior to his journalism career, Cosell went to school at New York University and worked in law, and was a major in the United States Army during the Second World War. In the early 1950s, Cosell had a sports radio show which he would record early in the morning. Ned Garver recalled doing an interview with him in 1951. Cosell told Garver that the sponsor did not provide any gifts to the guests on the show, but Garver found out later that they were actually gifts, which Cosell kept for himself. Cosell represented the Little League of New York when, in 1953, Hal Neal, president ABC Radio, then ABC Radio manager, asked him to do a show on New York flagship WABC featuring Little League participants. The show marked the beginning of a relationship with WABC and ABC Radio that would last his entire broadcasting career. Cosell hosted the Little League show for 3 years without pay and then decided to leave the law to become a full-time broadcaster. He approached Robert Pauley, president of ABC Radio, with the proposal for a weekly show. Pauley told him that the network cannot afford to develop an untried talent, but he was put on air to see if he can get a sponsor. To Pauley's surprise, Cosell came back with a relative shirt company as the sponsor, and Speaking of Sports was born. Cosell took his tell it like it is approach when he teamed up with ex-Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher Big Number 13, Ralph Branca, on WABC's pre- and post-game radio shows of the New York Mets in 1962. Otherwise on radio, Cosell did his show Speaking of Sports, as well as sports reports and updates for affiliated radio stations around the country. He continued his radio duties even after he became prominent on television. Cosell then became a sports anchor at WABC TV in New York, where he served in that role from 1961 to 1974. He expanded his commentary beyond sports to a radio show entitled Speaking of Everything. Cosell rose to prominence in the early 1960s, covering boxer Muhammad Ali beginning from the time that he fought under his birth name Cassius Clay. The two seemed to have an affinity despite their different personalities, and complemented each other in broadcasts. Cosell was one of the first sportscasters to refer to the boxer as Muhammad Ali after he changed his name, and supported him when he refused to be inducted into the military. Cosell was also an outspoken supporter of Olympic sprinters John Carlos and Tommy Smith after they raised their fists in a Black Power salute during their 1968 medal ceremony in Mexico City. In a time when many sports broadcasters avoided touching social, racial, or other controversial issues, and kept a certain level of collegiality towards the sports figures they commented on, Cosell did not, and indeed built a reputation around his catchphrase, "I'm just telling it like it is." Cosell's style of reporting transformed sports broadcasting in the United States. Whereas previous sportscasters had mostly been known for their color commentary and lively play-by-play, Cosell had an intellectual approach. His use of analysis and context brought television sports reporting close to a hard news reporting. However, his distinctive staccato voice, accent, syntax, and cadence were a form of color commentary all of their own. Cosell earned his greatest interest from the public when he backed Ali after the Boxers Championship title was stripped from him for refusing military service during the Vietnam War. Cosell found vindication several years later when he was able to inform Ali that the United States Supreme Court had unanimously ruled in favor of Ali in Clay versus United States. Cosell called most of Ali's fights immediately before and after the boxer returned from his 3-year exile in October 1970. Those fights were broadcast on tape delay, usually a week after they were transmitted on closed circuit. However, Cosell did not call two of Ali's biggest fights, the Rumble in the Jungle in 1974 and the first Ali-Joe Frazier fight in March 1971. Promoter Joe Princio selected actor Burt Lancaster, who had never provided color commentary for a fight, to work the bout with longtime announcer Don Dunphy and former light heavyweight champion Archie Moore. Cosell attended that fight as a spectator only. He would do a voiceover of that bout, but when it was shown on ABC's a few days before the second Ali-Frazier bout in January 1974, perhaps his most famous call took place in a fight between Joe Frazier and George Foreman for the World Heavyweight Championship in Kingston, Jamaica in 1973. When Foreman knocked Frazier to the mat first of 6 times, roughly 2 minutes into the first round, Cosell yelled out, "Down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier." His call as Frazier's first trip to the mat became one of the most quoted phrases in American sports broadcasting history. Foreman beat Frazier by TKO in the second round to win the World Heavyweight Championship. Cosell provided blow-by-blow commentary for ABC of some of the boxing's biggest matches during the 1970s and the early 1980s, including Ken Norton's upset win over Ali in 1973 and Ali's defeat of Leon Spinks in 1978, recapturing the heavyweight title for a second time. His signature toupee was knocked off in front of ABC cameras when a scuffle broke out after a broadcast match between Scott Lideau and Johnny Bordeaux. Cosell quickly retrieved his hairpiece and replaced it. During interviews in the studio with Ali, the champion would tease and threaten to remove the hairpiece, with Cosell playing along but never allowing it to be touched. Ali would frequently refer to Cosell's hairpiece as a squirrel, rabbit, or other wild animals. On one of these occasions, Ali said, "Cosell, you're a phony, and that thing on your head comes from the tail of a pony." With typical headline-generating drama, Cosell abruptly ended his broadcast association with the sport of boxing while providing coverage for ABC for the heavyweight championship fight between Larry Holmes and Randall Tex Cobb on November 26, 1982. Halfway through the bout, and with Cobb absorbing a beating, Cosell stopped providing anything more than rudimentary comments about round number, and the participants punctuated with occasional declarations of disgust during the 15 rounds. He declared shortly after the fight to a national television audience that he had broadcast his last professional boxing match. Cosell was also an ABC commentator for the television broadcast of the second of the two famous 1973 Battle of the Sexes tennis matches, and this one between Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean King. Cosell's place in sports journalism history is undeniable. Cosell was placed as number 1 on David J. Halberstam's top 50 all-time network television sports announcers on Yahoo Sports in January 2009. The sports complex at Hebrew University in Jerusalem was named for Cosell. In 2010, Cosell was posthumously inducted into the Observers category in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. In 1985, then the 1985 film Better Off Dead, one of the two Asian American teenage brothers who regularly challenged John Cusack's character to a street race, is said to have learned English from listening to Cosell. The band Ben Hold Fives have a song titled Boxing from 1995, which was written as a fictional monologue between Muhammad Ali to Cosell. Cosell's daughter, Hilary Cosell, was a producer of NBC Sports World and was one of the first women sports producers. She was also the senior producer of her father's show, Speaking of Everything with Howard Cosell, an assistant producer of ABC News 2020, and received 4 Emmy Award nominations. Cosell's nephew, Greg Cosell, is a senior producer at NFL Films. Cosell's grandson, Colin, was named public address announcer at Citi Field, home of the New York Mets, in 2018. Colin Cosell intended to honor his grandfather by initiating Mets third baseman Todd Frazier's last name the same way Cosell did with Joe Frazier's name in his famous Down Goes Frazier call, which lives on forever along with Cosell himself. Howard William Cosell was an American sports journalist, broadcaster, and